Okay, Trails from Zero challenge run. No intro this time. We're gonna get right into it. Let's start talking about rules. No random encounters. Monster chests are okay. Side quests are okay. Obviously, story fights are required. Just no random encounters roaming around the map. I know I call these low-level runs a lot. Zero is not going to be a low-level run. You'd have to cut out monster chests and side quests for that one. Tactical bonuses are too ridiculous in this game, and there's even going to be points where we're over-leveled. But this rule is still monstrously restrictive because this game is very, very strict with water sepith. This means we can't unlock slots very quickly, and our characters are going to have very small EP pools and spell lists for a huge portion of the game. So, still a tough run, even if level-wise we won't be at as bad of a spot at points. No items, no deaths, no CP farming or hotels. There's an exception to this for the very first fight of the game. While it's possible to get lucky and dodge a bunch, it's so tiny percent chance of success that I just saved myself the time and I got CP for that one fight. I didn't get more CP than was needed. Other than that, no CP farming, no hotels, no invigorate. Invigorate was also not allowed. This is all in the context of a max DP playthrough, so it includes all the side quests. And lastly, no cooking or fishing unless I need to do it for a quest. So with that being said, let's get into the run. On to our first fight of the game. These slimes are actually one of the single worst fights in the entire game, and they're the only fight we actually have to cheat on by grounding a little bit of CP. We have these NPCs that are difficult to pull aggro off of, and even if we do, our characters can't survive pulling that aggro, so we just S-craft a group of the slimes to loosen things up. After that, we move Randy close to the last two. These enemies will target the nearest target, and Randy is both our bulkiest character and the one equipped with the freeze resistance accessory that we got in the dungeon. We do need to hit a status effect on either Lloyd or Ellie's spellcast to make sure that Randy survives. I think I could have routed out this random chance by having Lloyd, instead of attacking turn 1 with a spell, run up and pull aggro from one of the slimes. He would have faced a chance at getting frozen because he doesn't have the freeze resist accessory on, but at the same time, Randy does need to take pretty much every hit that he takes in this attempt to build enough CP for the next fight. He needs to make sure that he's in range so that one hit from the next boss that we fight will give him 100 CP so he can S-craft. Otherwise, that fight's not really possible. From here, all we're doing is hammering the enemy with spells. You'll quickly notice that Zero is an incredibly arts-dominant game. We are not in third anymore, where both physical attacks and arts are very good. Here, we're back to spellcasting is king for the majority of the game. Before we get into the rest of the prologue, I want to talk about our playable characters, at least the main four, starting with Lloyd, our protagonist. He's awful, dogshit terrible, dumpster fire of a character. He's got a couple nice things as the game goes on. Brave Smash is an incredibly strong craft. Burning Heart's pretty good also once we get it in the late game. He also is our first character with access to an Impede. This is his best feature by far in my opinion. Impedes are very, very useful. He also has the highest base speed of our main four characters. It's not by much, it's only by a couple points, but it is a positive in his favor. But other than that, he's a physical character with a bad line that really struggles to do any damage whatsoever and gets his utility tools much too late into the game to be that worthwhile. If we could bench him, we would, but we're stuck with these four all game, so we're going to find ways to make use of Lloyd. Ellie, on the other hand, is the opposite of Lloyd. She's fantastic from start to finish. She's got the highest base art stat of the main four, she's got the best line of the main four, and she also has some of the best crafts in the game. Holy Bullet is an AoE CP heal that is super useful. It even restores her own CP, so it makes it effectively 20 CP only. It's dirt cheap. She gets a Heaven's Kiss later in the game, and she is generally our best spellcaster offensively due to her great base arts and good base speed. She also has, like I mentioned, a fantastic line. She has 2 wind blocks, which is not that detrimental in this game. Scent is something that's going to be glued to her most of the time from when we get it, and evade and move are both very good stats to have upgraded. Her only real downside is her first S-Craft is terrible. It's a 50% heal, which is horrible. Tio is great. She's not quite as good as Ellie, but she is going to be very strong throughout the game. She is a caster. She has a little bit worse of a line. The fact that it's one solid line, which is normally a really good thing, is tough here because it's really expensive to upgrade her. She's going to not get her final slot upgraded until literally the final chapter. Actually, literally the final dungeon. She's also very frail. She dies in one hit to a lot of things, which we have to be careful about, but she is overall one of the stronger casters in the game, and she also has by far the best S-crafts in the game. Her first S-craft is our highest damage S-craft for a very long time, and when our EP pool is running dry in early fights, it's kind of our only way to deal good damage. She also gets a Grail Sphere at the end of the game. Comes late, but a Grail Sphere is a Grail Sphere. She's also got a defense debuff, which, while not as good as it would be in Sky, has a couple cute uses. Randy is the other best character in the game, up there in contention with Ellie. He's a physical character, so his damage output is awful, but his high bulk is super useful early on, and he is fantastic at debilitating enemies. Power Smash is an AoE dirt cheap delay that gives the enemy way more delay than it gives him, so he acts, again, pretty much all the time, and if he doesn't, a speed buff or speed debuff on the enemy will fix that. He gets Crash Bomb, which is a bigger version of Tita's Smoke Cannon from the Sky games. It's an absolutely broken craft. It's awesome. And he also has a couple ways to apply Burn. His first S-craft, which is one of our only AoE S-crafts, applies Burn, and another craft called Salamander. So even though his strength is not that impressive, because physical attacks aren't that impressive even though he has the highest strength, the Burn is just dot damage, so it lets him do a little bit of damage anyway. Megalobat is one of the worst fights in the game, probably the absolute worst fight in the game. I'm turboing here, so it's a little tough to see what's going on, but essentially we need Randy to not dodge the first hit from the boss. We need him to build the CP for an S-craft. We need to forte him, so he one-shots all of the adds that are in range, and then we need Lloyd and Ellie to finish off the last add on the side. Tio's going to be on healing duty. She's going to try and keep up Randy's health. He's the only character that reliably takes hits from the boss, so he's going to be face tanking, and thankfully this boss, much like the slimes, will target the closest. That move, Fat Press, that will one-shot both of the girls no matter how much bulk boosters you give them. There's just not enough bulk boosters early in the game to let them survive. Lloyd needs everything at his disposal besides an HP quartz to live. So, and he's much tankier than either of them. Once they both dodge, now we have to kill the boss before we die, because we're limited on time based on Tio's EP, which is already run out. We actually need Randy to get a dodge at some point in the fight, which he gets right here. This is a lot more reliable. We have a bunch of evade boosters on both of the girls and Randy. So while the Fat Press dodge with both the girls is very, very unlikely, Randy getting one dodge throughout the entire fight is statistically reasonably likely. Here we see a defense debuff on the enemy. Tio can't cast a spell and her basic attacks are pretty weak, so this is her best way to contribute to damage while Lloyd and Ellie cast spells. She does do a little bit of a chip damage with her basic attack, which is actually needed. I believe we are within like 40 or less damage range of killing the boss. And here we actually need to burst it down, so we have Ellie use triple burst instead of a spell, even though it does a lot less damage. You'll actually see the fight freeze here in a second, because I tab out to check if Axle Rush does more damage than a basic attack. I don't believe it does, but I think I use it anyway, because I didn't know if I was going to ever use the craft again for the rest of the game, because it's pretty bad. It's basically like a small AoE basic attack. So the fight freezes for a second there, but afterwards Lloyd smacks it and S-crafts it, barely managing to finish it off. Something I'll note about Lloyd's S-craft while we're still in this fight is it's a lot like Pummel in the Sky games, in that it's great for grinding Sepith on Sepith upturns whenever we get that opportunity. This next fight is a little bit annoying. On the surface, it's an incredibly easy mob fight, but because of our rule set, we can't grind CP between this and the next boss fight, which means we need Lloyd to hit 200 CP from his very low amount from killing the last boss with an S-craft in this one fight. This means we need Lloyd to do the large majority of the heavy lifting and damage in this fight to be able to hit max CP. This makes this way more difficult and unreliable than it otherwise would be, and we're going to be kind of running around our characters and stalling out a lot when we could just, you know, hit the enemies and kill them. We also don't want to burn our other characters' resources too much, mainly their CP, EP we are free to heal between fights, because we will have uses for it later, and in general, if I don't have a specific use for using CP in a fight, I try not to use any, and I try to, you know, build up as much as I can on my characters that aren't using their CP, just in case I need it for something. I didn't carefully route out everything in this run, much like my other runs. I kind of play it by ear most of the time, so sometimes you'll see me futz around in fights just to get a little bit of extra CP. But here, this entire fight is futzing around to get Lloyd CP, so our other characters kind of get in the way and take hits, both because we need them to not purely focus on Lloyd, or else we'll, you know, lose. But also it will, you know, get them a little bit of CP from taking damage. The other thing that sucks here is Lloyd is our lowest damage character. In the early game, all of our characters are very comparable in damage. The gap between base stats in this game is very, very small. The gap is going to get bigger as they level up, but for now, all of our characters are kind of similar in stats, minus Randy being significantly tankier. So, Lloyd isn't horrible for damage early on. He's not that much worse than the casters magically, and he's a little bit stronger than them physically, but either way, one character doing most of the heavy lifting is not great this early on, but again, we need him to hit 200 CP for the next fight, which is one of the tougher fights in the whole game. We're also completely out of EP to heal Lloyd with Tear, so we're going to see our first usage of Aura Rain. I know I said it's a badass craft, and I stand by that it's a badass craft, but here, since we're not allowed to use items, we will have some situations where we do need to use it to heal. Also, Ellie is not going to get Holy Bullet for a while, so she doesn't have much to spend CP on. Her first craft is like a stronger physical attack on a character with mediocre strength, so it's not super useful, even though we did use it in the last fight. Wald is a massive piece of shit and one of the worst fights in the game. We immediately burned that 200 CP we just built on an S-craft. This fight is on a timer, and because we can't use items, whenever we heal, we have to cast Tear, which uses 2 turns, which is a huge dent to that timer over what you would normally do, which is throw items to heal. This means we unfortunately just have to get really lucky with dodges. I promise this is the last fight where the solution is going to be just get really lucky with dodges. But we do, at the very least, have all of the evasion gear that we bought for Megalobat available to just give to Lloyd. So we don't have to burn more resources to try and make the fight more reliable. This is a very lucky attempt. This is about as smoothly as this fight can go. And even then, I think we still cut it pretty close on the turn count. Here we have the boss of the prologue, and we have a new party member, Wazzy. All of our new party members that we get throughout the game are all going to join for very short periods of time. In fact, Wazzy's going to leave right after this fight and not join again until the ending sequence of Chapter 3. Wazzy's a great character. He's fast, he's very strong magically, and he has a great line. We don't have a chance to customize him right now, so he's got kind of a fixed set of quartz, but we don't have anything really to give him anyway. And he is going to be offensively our best character physically and magically because he joins significantly higher level than the rest of the main cast here. We actually get a choice of who to bring to this fight before we start, and we pick Randy for his delay. The enemy with the machete on the side is very, very strong physically, and we can't really kill things super fast, so we just have Randy pretty much perma-delay him. I make a mistake later in the fight, so he doesn't get perma-delayed, but the idea is we could just perma-delay him. We also like getting a status effect on the other guy. It's reasonably likely because both Wazzy and Lloyd are constantly casting spells that can apply status effects. You'll also see a couple seconds ago that machete guy almost one-shot Randy. I got greedy and left him undelayed for one turn, which let him get 2 attacks off. The AoE is not very scary, but it was that near one-shot that if it targeted Lloyd would have actually outright killed him. I make another minor mistake in this fight, although it doesn't end up being that big of a deal, which is I try to get a little cute, I try to get a little flashy, and I end up finishing off this enemy with Wazzy's S-Craft. Just because I didn't know if I would use it later and it'd be the only chance to show off the animation, but Wazzy does actually retain his CP when he rejoins the party. He doesn't need 100 CP right off the bat or anything, so it's a very minor misplay, it doesn't really matter, but technically it's not optimal. Moving on to Chapter 1 and a monster chest. This monster chest is not quite as easy as it first seems because we don't have both Randy and Tio's S-Crafts, which would be what quickly finish it off normally. So we do have to position Tio up front so she can either get hit or hit some enemies with her S-Craft. We get a lucky crit turn, which lets Randy kill 2 outright, but they would all die to burn anyway. We get unlucky with a rush turn here, but it doesn't matter because it just dies to the burn tick. Here we have a really bad fight against these 2 purple monkey enemies, these 2 Bonzi Buddy looking fellas. This fight is really bad because they are very tanky, hit very hard, and are very, very difficult to deal with how few resources we have. Randy getting that first dodge doesn't matter too much. If he got hit on the first attack, he would have been knocked out of range of the second one. Here we see Tiger Charge on a 7th up turn. The one saving grace here is these enemies are vulnerable to delay, so we chrono down them and just start delaying over and over again. Unfortunately, we don't have much in the way of accuracy boosters, and while Randy is much more likely to hit than he is to miss, you can get unlucky, and I get very unlucky in this fight, so we try to make sure his health is always topped off. Also, we don't have the EP to use spells for that long. Ellie casts 2 heat waves and a firebolt, and she's out of gas for the rest of the fight. This means the only thing we can really do is have Tio build up CP and S-Craft them. You'll also see Randy missing the enemy gets counterattacked and almost one-shot. So this is why we need him to always be topped off on health. That right monkey, you'll notice, dodged another attack. He's Neo. He's fucking Neo from the Matrix. He dodges so much throughout this attempt, and it almost screws me over. This is about as unlucky as an attempt can go and still succeed. It's really, really bad. You'll notice the one on the left also dodges one, which is unfortunate, but that's not that big of a deal, because that one is still pretty heavily delayed. From here, it's just wailing on them for chip damage until Tio gets an S-Craft over and over again. You'll notice Randy misses another delay, and at this point he's running low on CP, and if he misses one more delay, it's going to be a problem. Because he's stacked so much delay with Power Smash, he can actually sneak in an attack here, get the CP back to delay again, and still act first, because he's just delayed their turns with Chrono down on so much. And there's another miss on that right monkey. And another miss on that right monkey, and you'll notice it's now getting its turn. This is potentially an issue because these monsters can call allies. If you've seen my previous challenge runs, you'll know that's my favorite text in the whole series. I love seeing call allies. I hate enemies that summon more enemies, and the ads here are very difficult to deal with. Thankfully, Lloyd can impede its cast. It decides to cast a really strong physical attack instead, except he also misses, but thankfully he hits the second impede. These enemies, I don't know if it's when they're on low health or just when they build up a lot of CP, prefer to use this big one-shot craft instead. But it's much better for us if they do this instead of call allies. Thankfully, we can get Randy back on delaying it, and it's not too big of a deal anymore. We also have Lloyd to impede it again if things get hairy. Here we have another monster chest. It's one of the sketchier mob fights in the game. We do need to get a little bit lucky with dodges. Again, we do have evade equipment on Randy, so it's not the most unlikely, but it's certainly not a super reliable strat, although it is not nearly as bad as Megalobat or Wall. Here I make a little bit of a misplay. I accidentally give Lloyd the single target forte instead of Randy, and that makes things a little bit awkward because this S-Craft does a lot less damage than it otherwise should, and I don't know if it changes the benchmark. I don't know how many of them would actually die, but it's I did put the forte in the wrong spot. Here we get to Holy Bullet with Ellie. We could have Aura Rained if we absolutely needed Randy to survive, but it's much better to just Holy Bullet instead, because obviously Ellie gets to keep a lot of CP. Here we have a monster extermination against these Fall Eagle enemies. These enemies are very, very strong, but they are vulnerable to delay. Unlike the monkeys that we just fought, though, these enemies take knockback, so we can't just power smash them for free. You'll notice that we already knocked one of them out of range. They are, however, vulnerable to Feint, which is a 1 in 5 chance on Lloyd's Stun Break. Unfortunately, I think we need the Feint here. I don't know if we necessarily need it on his first turn, and we get really lucky and we get them back to back. We definitely don't need them back to back. But I don't know if we need the 1 in 5 on the first feint, but we need a feint on one of them at some point. Once they're feinted, we can move Randy and position him in such a way that he can push them to be in a single power smash. This way, he can just delay lock them, and the rest of the fight is pretty solved from there. Like the monkeys, though, we want to make sure he's topped off on his HP at all times in case he gets a counterattack because of an unlucky miss. Here, Tio's out of EP and doesn't really have a good thing to do. If she analyzes, it's going to drain her of CP, so she's going to be further from her next S-Craft. I choose to anyway, just because I thought, well, I'm hitting it physically and it might add up, but it dies to Burn Tick right away, so that ended up being a mistake. It's not that big of a deal, but it is kind of a minor misplay again. Here, we do something funny, which is we start to surround its corpse. This is just so our characters can wail on it and gain CP without knocking it around the map. But it does look very, very funny. It also lets us keep our characters all in range of Holy Bullet, so Ellie can start giving everyone CP back. We also S-Craft with Lloyd just to speed up things. We're drained of EP, and this fight's going to take forever if we don't use S-Craft, so... Also, if we get too many tactical bonuses, we will shoot up in level, and this game already has us shoot up in level because it has a lot of forced grinding quests that will naturally give you good tactical bonuses because you're like hitting them with advantage and getting a bunch of turns or whatever. So, we do try to kill things a little bit quicker than we would in the Sky games just to kind of avoid getting too over-leveled. We actually don't even hit the low-level achievement in this run, although that's very difficult to do even in a run where you're aiming to stay under-leveled by killing off characters, so... In a Deathless run where we're not allowed to kill off characters, it's very difficult to hit. Here we have a section of the game where we're forced to do a bunch of these mob fights. I only show the first one, but I'm going to shoot up in level, and the reason is because there's a lot of fights just like this one here. After the forced grinding quest, we're stuck with just Lloyd and Randy. The girls leave the party. We don't get to pick this time. It's always Lloyd and Randy. And we have this monster chest. We forte Randy so that his S-Craft will hit hard. And we S-Craft the enemy on a crit turn and kill them. Pretty simple. Here we move on to another fight that we have to just kind of chip away at and delay lock infinitely. We don't have much CP because we had to use Randy's S-Craft on the last fight, but this boss isn't too strong, thankfully. You'll notice we also have Walled from earlier, this time as an NPC ally. We have to heal him right away because he starts the fight on low health. But after that, our goal is to just build CP on Randy. The more of these enemies that go for him, because they don't do that much damage, the better. Because that way he'll build CP faster. We also move Lloyd away and have him S-Craft the boss. It does a decent chunk, and we don't want enemies to be targeting Lloyd. We want them to be targeting Randy, so we build CP, but unfortunately most of them start to go for Walled. We do get a kind of lucky team rush here that builds a little bit of CP for Randy and lets us thin out the herd for the ads a little bit. Now Walled is going to start going off and killing them one by one, so Randy's not going to have a constant generation of CP anymore, but we've already delayed this boss quite a bit and it's already not particularly fast, plus it has a speed down, so thankfully he doesn't need to build that much CP anymore. Here we start having Lloyd move over. He's really only going to do chip damage, but it's better than nothing, and now we're at the point where we don't need them to hyper-focus Randy anyway. Power Smash only costing 20 means we can Power Smash regular attack ad nauseum. And as long as Randy gets that regular attack off before the enemy's delay catches up, we can pretty much loop it permanently as long as he never misses. Walled here actually does a little bit more damage than our other characters and is going to be our best source of damage in this fight. Thankfully, all he can do is walk up and attack, so he never really wastes turns. He always just wails on the boss, which is helpful for us. Here he even gets a rush turn and speeds up the process a little bit, thankfully. Here we have a pretty tough monster chest that I think I probably should have waited till later in the game to do. It's intended that you do it now, it's not a particularly high level one, it's just these enemies are pretty tanky and they can cause death blow, and I eat a couple hits and rely on just not getting hit by the status. If I had just a tad more damage, I could have done this fight reliably, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm just lazy and didn't want to double back, so I kind of just mashed my head against it now and, you know, got lucky and killed it. That Deadly Strike, I think, has an incredibly high chance of death blow. I think it's like 50%. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's quite high to the point where we get very lucky. Generally speaking, in these runs, I don't care as much if mob fights or monster chests have kind of sketchy or unreliable strats, just because they're much less interesting fights in general. But again, I probably should have just held off for a little bit. I don't even remember what I get from this chest. I think it's a really bad piece of armor. Something else to note, I believe after the ape fight in Chapter 1, I should have done it before the ape fight, I did go to the casino and get the armor. It has basically the best armor in the game. It gives +5 speed. We don't get better armor until the final chapter. And it also gives boots with 10% evasion. And evasion is a much better stat in this game than the Sky games, so it's something that we want to take advantage of. I never sell any of it once it gets outclassed, because technically the casino is a way to grind infinite money, and it's a no grinding run. So I buy one copy of each piece of armor for everyone, and then I never sell it. It stays in my inventory the rest of the game. The extra 5 speed is also incredibly helpful. We are not going to have action ports until our next guest character joins. We're going to be stuck on a single action 1 that the game gave us, as well as a single cast 1 that the game gave us. Actually, I don't know if we have the cast 1 yet. I think we don't have the cast... Sorry, that's a lie. I misspoke. We don't have the cast 1 until next chapter. We only have the action 1 right now, so we're really trenches for speed. Here we have a fight where our formation is forced to be messed up because story reasons. This fight's a little bit random. These dogs can sometimes just choose not to act and, you know, be very friendly, and other times they can just kind of permadelay one character and nuke them because it's undodgeable. So the first thing we do is run our characters into the corner. This is so the dogs will kind of group up on us, which we want to happen so we can hit them with AoEs like Chrono Down and like Power Smash. You'll notice I'm very conservative with the girls' EP pools. I didn't think they were going to level up off of this fight and get their EP back for the next fight because you have to do 2 back-to-back. This was a mistake. They do level up off of this fight, and so I did not need to play nearly as conservative as I do here. But also, because tactical bonuses make this game very variable, it's a nice illustration of kind of how to play the fight if you're not in a situation where you're going to level up. But the idea here is similar to a lot of the other fights. We want to just delay the enemies over and over again with Randy. We want to make sure they have speed down and all that. We also have Lloyd trapped in a corner there. It's not that big of a deal because we wanted everyone but Randy stuck in the corner for a little bit anyway, but we do eventually want Lloyd out and about and helping again, so we do move Tio to let him free from his prison. Unfortunately, he immediately gets fanged, I think is what it's called, by the dog, which puts the dog out of position and delays Lloyd. This isn't the end of the world. The girls can survive with the dog for a little bit, but it is something that we're going to have to deal with eventually here in this fight. Ellie's also just going to be casting a lot of holy bullets early on. The CP restoration is so unbelievably strong, and it's a craft that's going to be useful all game. It gets absolutely gutted in the next game. It's so good. Now what we're doing with Lloyd here is we're kind of having him walk around and corral the dogs to help deal with Power Smash's awkward knockback. So we have Lloyd and Randy on either side of the dogs, forming kind of a wall so that the knockback keeps them together for Power Smash. Lloyd can also move out of the way now because they're going to both get knocked back in the same direction, and Lloyd can help the girls deal with the dog that's been wailing on them for a little bit here. Something else to note is we actually haven't upgraded our weapons at all, and we won't be upgrading the girls' weapons for basically the whole game. Ellie doesn't get a gun upgrade until pretty late into the game, and Tio doesn't get a staff upgrade until... well, you'll see when Tio gets a staff upgrade. We'll put it that way. Lloyd and Randy will get weapon upgrades more often, but still pretty infrequently. Only when they need the spike in damage do they ever get one. Here we move on to the last boss fight of Chapter 1. We have the same 2 Mafia goons from the prologue and the same 3 dogs that we just fought in kind of the swarm encounter. This fight is a little bit of a pain in the ass. It's kind of hard to control every variable, but at the very least, these Mafia enemies will take off turns to heal, and like I said before, the dogs can also waste turns. I make a little mistake here. I thought everything was vulnerable to burn. It's actually just the Mafia goons that are vulnerable to burn, so Randy probably wasn't supposed to salamander that turn. It's probably not worth it just to burn 1 enemy. It would have definitely been worth it to burn 3, but it's not something that's such a big mistake that's worth reattempting 2 long back-to-back fights over. Here we see another Aura Rain usage. These enemies are pretty strong and tough to survive, so Ellie's S-Craft, even though it's a lot worse than something like Chloe's S-Craft in the Sky games, still will see use throughout the playthrough. Here we can get a pretty chunky power smash and delay 4 of them at least. Even if we can't stun lock everything infinitely like certain fights, it's still very, very helpful to just delay a couple enemies. Another nice thing about Lloyd's S-Craft, it does have a 100% seal chance. Not quite as useful as delay or later blind, but when we have one enemy out of delay range here, Lloyd can seal it and make sure that it doesn't act as frequently. I guess technically it acts more frequently because it just wastes its turn every time with seal, but it will stop it from, you know, damaging us for a few turns. The one weakness to Power Smash is it's pretty tough to keep enemies in AoEs when Randy is, you know, sending them all over the place with knockback. You can't choose what angle he Power Smashes from without first moving him the turn before. So sometimes it just means we don't get to keep enemies grouped up for AoEs, but the delay is more than worth it. Here I try to move Tio in a range where she'll be able to hit 3 enemies with her S-Craft, but it doesn't work out that way. She needed 1 more point of movement, so we only hit 2, but we do manage to finish them off pretty quickly, and then we only have 2 dogs left, which is not very difficult to deal with, especially now since we're actually casting spells. Something to note about spells in this game, level 1 and 2, like early level spells, are much weaker than the Sky games. You kind of need higher level spells, but we're never going to have the EP for them, really. So we're going to be in this awkward middle ground where we want to cast low level spells because it's better for our EP pool, but sometimes they don't do enough damage to be worth it, so we're going to have to drain our EP pool casting stronger spells. This is a problem that is never going to go away, even once our characters are maxed out in the final dungeon. Here we move on to Chapter 2, and we have kind of an annoying monster extermination at the start. You'll also notice, starting in this fight, every once in a blue moon, you'll see my Twitch chat in the corner. I did a couple of streams of this challenge run. I think, actually, a couple that I kept successful attempts from anyway. I think it was like 1 or 2. So, just know that the reason the chat is on screen sometimes is because I did the fights live. But this is another fight where we have to get the enemies grouped and then delay lock them with Randy. This fight is very, very annoying. It's a little bit inconsistent with how the enemies choose to move, but the idea is we move our characters into the corner, so they have to all be in generally the same range to shoot at us. And then once they all line up, Randy can go over and he can start power smashing. Here I sit in menus because I'm talking to my friends in chat. I'm like explaining to them how the game works. I'm explaining how delay works, all that lame nerd shit. So the fight goes a little bit slower than it otherwise would. I think in the future I'm probably not going to stream that many attempts because I just like also having the fights all separated into separate recordings. I posted a VOD for people that were interested in kind of the process, but I ended up taking it down just because at first I wanted the precedent that like, oh, I'm going to start streaming these and then posting the VODs, and then I decided, no, I don't want to do that. I changed my mind. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to just, I'm going to stick to my old formula. I think it's better for my workflow that way. Maybe I'll still stream attempts, challenge run stuff. I probably will. I'll just separate the recordings instead of recording the whole stream. It's probably the happy middle ground, actually. But either way, I digress. It's another fight where we're kind of delay locking these enemies permanently. The problem here is that these enemies are like abyss worms from the Sky games. They will counter with Earthshaker if we let them get a turn. This is going to deal devastating damage to our party, and we don't want that to happen, so we really, really want to make sure they get perma-delayed. Also, we're hitting 3 of them instead of just 2 with Randy's Power Smash, so he's pretty much never going to run out of CP, especially since we also have Ellie to Holy Bullet him. We want to do fights in a specific order in Chapter 2 because Randy needs to hit Crash Bomb before one of the harder fights in the game. So, we take this fight early because it also is locking off a part of the world map that we can get chests from as well. Here we have a monster chest. Excuse me, I'm burping. I don't know if that picked up on my mic. Here we have a monster chest. It's easy. These enemies don't hit very hard, and we kind of just use AoEs on them until they die. So, there's not much to talk about. I guess there's that. I was going to stay quiet the whole fight. But there is actually one thing to talk about. At some point in this chapter, we have to use the art that we just used, which causes stealth and makes it so the character doesn't take aggro. I actually think they might just not be able to take damage at all. But we need to use that at some point. We do it in this fight because it's easy to fit in. We never use the art again for the rest of the playthrough. Stealth is a pretty powerful effect, but expensive art for single target stealth is not super useful. Here we have another pretty easy monster chest. Kind of the same deal. We're going to hit things with AoE spells. These enemies are a little bit scarier. They're a little bit stronger, but again, this fight is nothing to write home about. Something to talk about, I guess, is that attribute guard. So when enemies resist, it's not nearly as detrimental in this game as it is in the Sky games. Obviously, if an enemy is like 50% resistant to an element, we probably don't want to use that element. But if an enemy's like 90, 80, or 90% resistant to an element versus 100, it's usually not worth rearranging our spell list for. And sometimes we're going to use stronger base power moves over moves that enemies are weak to, because they're still better for damage. Here we have another, not side quest, this is actually my story quest, sorry, where we have to do a bunch of repetitive mob fights again. I'm only showing the first one here. It's a bunch of these Farticus enemies, rap enemies, but I'm only going to show the first one. But the way I wrote this is a little weird. I only do the first one now, and then I run into another side quest because I wanted to tackle that side quest before I got all the levels from this one. Because it's a hard fight, and I wanted to do the fight at least a little bit under-leveled. But I also needed to wait until Randy got Crash Bomb to make the fight reliable. So, I do this first fight, then I'm going to do the next fight that's in the video, and then, not shown in video, I run back and do the rest of the fights in this area, which are identical to the one that you're watching now. This, combined with the forced grinding quest in the last chapter, is actually going to make us over-level for a little bit in the quote-unquote low-level run, because tactical bonuses are a dog-shit terrible mechanic. I hate them. I hate them so much. EXP scaling, I'm fine with, because usually, even being a couple levels under-leveled in Trails games is quite detrimental. But, like, kind of random vast swings in EXP gain are, I don't know, it's not cool to me. As someone that likes to play games on lower resource, kind of lower level lower Sepith, whatever your game's resources are. I tend to not like to grind them because I think it makes things less fun. Something like tactical bonus is a little bit of a bummer to me. But at the same time, they're very, very difficult to route around, so I just find strats that I think are consistent and strong. And the tactical bonus I get is the tactical bonus I get. It is what it is. Okay, here we have some fights against the Crossbell Guardian Force, 2 back-to-back. These are some of the harder fights in the game, but also we're a little bit stronger than we have been so far. We have some more slots unlocked on our casters, so we can now cast spells like Dark Matter. Dark Matter is very strong, it sucks enemies in, reduces their movement, and we also have Crash Bomb on Randy. Big AoE blind. These enemies are quite strong. They do a lot of damage when they do hit, and the gun guy in the back can inflict seal. It's very unlikely that he hits with a blind, but right now he was out of range of the blind turn 1. It's not a big deal, but, it lets him get 1 hit off and seal Ellie for a turn, who's casting spells anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then next time Randy gets a turn, he can just Crash Bomb again. Get used to seeing the text Crash Bomb and Randy throwing the little flashbang, because he's going to use that craft a lot in this playthrough. It is incredibly good, and it gets like double nerfed in Azure, as in the craft itself gets nerfed, and so many enemies in that game resist blind, whereas here, they're vulnerable to it for a huge, huge portion of the game. We're okay burning EP on the girls because I know they're going to level up. I made sure to check this time, unlike the dogfight where I kind of did it much slower and less optimal than I could have because I wasn't sure. So we're fine to just go wild with casting spells. These enemies can also stun, or feint, as it's actually called. That's another thing that's scary if we don't blind them. It's okay if a couple hits get through, or even if one of our characters gets feinted like Randy does there. They're going to miss a majority of their attacks while blinded. And even if they only miss like half, then that's still more than enough for our party to stay alive. We do want to make sure Randy's health is topped off though, because he doesn't get a level. And here we have Noelle. Noelle's kind of a piece of shit fight. She's very difficult. The one saving grace is she's vulnerable to delay. So if we can Dark Matter these enemies up, we can just delay lock them with Randy. That's the initial idea that I had. That's the way you would normally do this fight. But we get really unlucky here. So Randy throws a Crash Bomb and gets to blind everything except Noelle, who's immune. Ellie heals us up, and then Randy gets hit through the blind and sealed. That is really bad. We try to salvage it a little bit. We S-craft with Tio to get everything weak so we can, try and kill them off faster. But Randy getting that seal is really unlucky. We can't even use his S-craft to help finish things off. Also, the entire party has sleep immunity accessories on because Noelle has an AoE sleep that we can't really recover from easily. Here you can see me kind of go around my spell list not knowing what to do. I end up just topping off Ellie so she doesn't die. And now we're stuck with Randy having to go through a turn sealed, and having to wait till his next turn before he can start delaying. Which, spoiler alert, he's never going to start delaying. I do S-craft with him to finish off the guy that caused seal in the first place. I didn't want to risk it happening again after it already happened once, even though it's pretty unlikely that it would. So I S-craft to get the other two enemies low, and to finish off the seal guy. That S-craft also makes it so, I think both the halberd guys here died a burn tick, yeah. The burn damage is not negligible, it's actually pretty good for this point in the game, and not horrible throughout, most of the game. Here I have Lloyd S-Craft on the step up turn again. The main limiters are going to be water and fire. Fire is going to be a little bit more stingy early on, but throughout the game, water is going to be the most stingy by far. We are not, like I said earlier, we're not going to get all our slots upgraded until the final dungeon. And when I say all of our slots, I mean all of our slots on Ellie and Tio. Lloyd and Randy are going to be sitting on tier 1 slots for the entire game. I think I give Randy 1 tier 3 slot at the end of the game, so his support ability, which is a mechanic that'll come into play in a little bit here, does a bit more damage, but yeah. Here we have a series of mob fights against these same gang member enemies from earlier. Here we don't have to hold back to get Lloyd a bunch of CP, so we can just kill them. We do have 3 fights back to back, so there's a little bit that we have to worry about there, but overall these fights aren't too hard. Something also to note about Ellie, a craft that she got, Wild Swan. I didn't really talk about it in character intros, but I did say that one useful thing about Lloyd is his impede, but Ellie actually has a better impede because she doesn't break formation as much, the range is much higher, and you can use it to grind Sepith, so even the one thing Lloyd's good at, Ellie is still better at. Here, we have another fight, this time against the rival gang. After this fight, it's going to be a third one, with both together, all 8 enemies. Again, none of them are that hard or interesting to talk about. We kind of crash bomb them, and from there, they're more or less neutralized, unless we get incredibly unlucky. Voice crack. Holy shit. I'm leaving it in. I'm not re-recording. I'm keeping the voice crack in. I don't care. Like I said before, the last fight here is just going to be the same thing, but with both the groups of enemies now. We're going to dark matter them, we're going to crash bomb them, we're going to do all the stuff we did before, except there's more enemies. We do have Randy S-Craft them on a crit turn just to speed things along. After they're all grouped up, we can have Tio S-Craft the rest and either kill them or bring them incredibly low. And then we can have Lloyd finish off the last one. I was gonna just kill him normally, but I saw the Sepith upturn and Lloyd's CP is not that valuable, so figure I'd get some extra. Now we move on to the Savage Beasts. This monster extermination is a little bit tough. We move the girls out of range right away because they just can't survive. I think Lloyd also is in danger of getting one shot here. And then we have Randy, of course, use Crash Bomb again. Depending on how the enemies move turn 1, I believe the girls can be in range, so there's a little bit of luck there. But as long as we can get them to the point where they're Crash Bomb and focused mostly on Randy, it's not that big of a deal. Especially since they're also vulnerable to Seal, so that's something we could have saved Lloyd's S-Craft for as well, if I wanted this fight to be a little bit more reliable, but I really wanted the Sepith. They do have one really strong attack. You saw it used on Randy a couple seconds ago, that charge. That's really scary because it can't miss and it will one-shot our weaker characters, but thankfully if they use it on Randy and they charge through him, they'll land right next to him, and then he can start power smashing them. So once they're both in range to be power smashed, then from there the fight is more or less over. And it doesn't take as long as some of the other fights because at least we have spells this time to actually deal damage. Next, we're going to do a couple fights in the Geofront, a couple mob fights. Again, the monster chests here aren't too interesting to talk about. There's some mobs, we cast some AoE spells. We probably throw a Crash Bomb. They're generally not too threatening in this game, the mob fights. They're much, much easier than the previous games in the series. Oh no, we S-craft them, we don't Crash Bomb. My bad. Either way, there's not too much to talk about with them, so not going to talk about them much. You'll notice I turboed there because I thought Randy was going to die, but unfortunately we didn't get unlucky with damage rolls and he survived. I could have S-crafted with Tio or Randy himself to guarantee that doesn't happen, but again, I play a little sloppy during mob fights just because I don't really care about them very much. Another monster chest, although this one I think is a little bit easier if I remember correctly. This grouping of enemies is slightly less threatening, not that the first one was particularly threatening. This one it looks like we do Crash Bomb though. Maybe because I took one too many hits in the last fight and was a little nervous, I'm not sure. You'll notice we're still having our physical characters cast spells. Well, less so Randy, who's using a lot of his crafts, but Lloyd is still casting spells. Lloyd's art stat is not good. It's just that, again, physical attacks are so bad that it's actually better for him to be casting spells than it is for him to attack physically. Here we get into a kind of annoying fight. This fight is a little bit RNG. These enemies can take turns to just damage themselves. They can pull you all around the map. This fight is kind of chaotic and random. They also all self-destruct, so I have to kind of adapt a little bit on the fly. Also, anytime you see the game freeze, usually it means I'm tabbing out to see if I'm still recording. The freezes are a lot more noticeable here because I'm speeding up the clips less because fights just don't take 20 to 30 minutes like they do in the Sky games. But it's usually I'm like, oh no, am I still recording or not? This attempt is good. Something you just saw from Tio there, she does actually have a delay that delays everything on the map, which it sounds really good, and it is pretty strong, but the problem is it's doing it through another character named Zeit. He's a wolf, and so it will put Zeit's turn on the turn order, and then you have to wait for his turn, and then he'll delay everyone. So it's not quite as good as it initially sounds, but it is still a screen-wide delay and has its uses, although it's much more niche than you might expect. Also, you'll notice that we have one of the few uses, actually not even few uses, I think the only use of, I don't know if it's called Sylphid or Sulfurion, whatever, the movement up spell, whatever the hell it's called. We use it on Randy so he can get back on the boss to, I believe, keep delaying it. It's always fun when you have uses for these kind of awkward spells, like move up and move down. Move, I think, is a very strong stat. I think it's a very underrated stat in these games. But the absurd boost that the movement spells give, usually not immensely useful over just, you know, equipping a move quartz. But hey, in this fight, it is very, very useful, so. Here we get into a little bit of an unlucky positioning on the boss in that he traps Tio in a corner between a bunch of enemies that self-destruct. This is immensely unlucky, and I think I cast A Reflex here, thinking that self-destruct might be a magic attack. It's not, by the way. This A Reflex is a waste of time. But Tio eats one self-destruct anyway, so she ends up being okay. And once one of the enemies is dead, she can, you know, move out of range, and then the rest of the fight's not too hard. This boss is vulnerable to a lot of status effects. It's also vulnerable to delay, so we don't need to abuse status effects too much, but this freeze here doesn't really do anything. I think it might make it not dodge. Like, it might no longer dodge power smashes, but we don't power smash it again anyway. We just S-craft it with Lloyd on a 7th upturn. That's kind of why I was stalling, to get that extra win 7th. Here we have a new party member and into the final dungeon of the chapter. So first of all, this dungeon, there's extra turn bonuses. Most of them suck. It's like Death Blow, Vanish, which might as well be Death Blow, and Guard turns, which make it so whatever is attacking does no damage. And we also have a new party member, Noelle. I was not expecting Noelle to be nearly as useful as she actually was in this run. I thought she was very bad going into this run, but she does have some uses that make her nice to have when she's around. So, first of all, even though she's actually the lowest level character we have, because again, the forced grinding quests slingshot us ahead a little bit here, she does come with a very upgraded line. So she's got a good EP pool and a bunch of good quartz equipped that our other characters that don't have slots unlocked can't really take advantage of. Because of this, the fact she can equip more quartz means she has more stats. She also has a good weapon. We don't even have weapon upgrades for the physical characters yet, so she can do something resembling physical damage, while Randy and Lloyd aren't really capable of that outside of their S-crafts. Noelle also gets a ton of Sepith on Sepith upturns if she assault rushes or if she S-crafts, which are good, less in the moment and more for like the kind of long-term metagamey stuff. Here we move on to a monster chest. This one I think I do slightly unreliably. I believe these axe enemies have a chance to death blow, and I think I let them get one attack off. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just am not motivated to find super consistent clears for monster chests because I don't care for them that much. But they are fixed encounters in the game, they're not random encounters in the game, so I think they're fair game when talking about a no grinding run. Noelle's S-Craft also just does good damage for this point in the game, again thanks to the fact she has our highest strength stat right now. From, again, the weapon and the quartz. We also have support abilities now. Whenever we have more than 4 characters in the party, the character in the back will occasionally come in with a support ability. And if we have 2 party members extra, we'll have 2 characters that can come in with support abilities. Lloyd's Extend Hearts is actually one of the better ones. That is something that is genuinely good about Lloyd. His support ability gives a strength buff and CP to the whole party. Pretty cool. Here we have another monster chest. These enemies are much less scary than the previous ones. Their attacks, as you can see, don't hit that hard, and I believe they are vulnerable to status effects. They're also vulnerable to delay. Noelle has a single target delay. It's not as good as Randy's, but it does, like you see there, get a lot of Sepith. Anyway, back to support abilities real quick. You're not going to see Ellie's or Tio's. Ellie's is not particularly good. It's like a heal and defense buff, which both of those things are pretty useless. Tio's is amazing. It's a Grail Sphere, but we want Tio on the field most of the time because she's a very strong character, and that's more useful than the occasional hit of damage immunity. Randy's is one you'll be seeing a lot because he's going to be in the back a lot when we have guest characters, but it's unfortunately not that good. It's called Burning Divider. It's just a okay damage physical attack that can cause burn. Here we move on to the boss of Chapter 2. Yin is a decently scary boss, mostly just because we don't have great tools to do damage, and so we have to stay alive for quite a while. Here we pretty much immediately pop Noelle's S-Craft on the Sepith upturn, again just kind of for the metagame grindy stuff. We also move the girls into the corner so they're out of range of Yin, and that Noelle and Randy are more juicy targets. Yin also has Body Split. What the Body Splits do is they have, I think, just one attack, and it's an attack with 90% death blow chance. We can't afford to have everyone have death blow resist because we do need some offense to kill the boss, so we only have it on Noelle and Randy. Thankfully, unlike the main boss, which is not vulnerable to delay, the clones are vulnerable to delay, so if we ever see them getting into awkward positioning, we can have Randy and Noelle delay them. What the boss is vulnerable to, though, is stat down, which you've been seeing thus far. We've been lowering its speed, making sure it gets less turns. Here the boss S-Crafts. It does quite a bit of damage, but we survive it fairly comfortably with both of our physical characters. Even the girls can survive it as well. I think they have a hard time not getting one-shot by the strength buff version, but the regular version is not too tough to survive if Yin decides to target one of them instead. Yin also has a self buff. 50% strength and 50% speed is scary, but stat down means we can get rid of the speed buff. Unlike the Sky Arc, you can't have a buff and a debuff of the same stat on at the same time, so if we speed debuff, it just gets rid of the speed buff completely. You'll notice we're sticking to a lot of weak spells that are only doing like 200 to 300 damage because we don't have the EP to spam stronger spells yet. Again, this makes it a little bit tough to kill Yin in time, because later in the fight, Yin is going to try to get off a strength-boosted S-Craft, which thankfully in this attempt never happens, but it is something scary that we have to worry about if we don't kill the boss fast enough. Here we have another Sepith upturn, this time hitting 3 enemies, which is pretty fantastic. This is a super helpful thing to get. Also, Noelle's S-Craft just does good damage for this point in the game. We also got a crit. Noelle has Strike equipped, so she does have a 10% chance to crit. Getting a crit on an S-Craft is pretty lucky, but also it hit one of the clones, so it's not like so lucky that it changes the strat, like killing the boss faster or something. It's only 10%, so it shouldn't be expected that you get a crit S-Craft in this fight. We also eventually defense debuff with Tio. We do this because the physical characters do actually do some damage with their S-Craft. Well, it's mostly Randy just does it with his S-Craft, whereas Noelle does it with both her regular attacks and her S-Craft. So even though defense debuffs, again, are not as strong in this game as the Sky games, they are useful at some points. You see the recording freeze again because I probably checked to make sure I was recording. I'm a very forgetful individual. I think I've said this in commentary before. I have a really bad memory, so I will panic a lot and check to make sure I'm recording in fights. And sometimes I do forget to record and have to redo long fights, and that sucks. Here we need to try and finish off Yin Here we can see the buff, and then what's going to come next is likely the S-Craft. So we start casting higher level spells to make sure Yin dies before we have to deal with trying to survive the much stronger S-Craft. We do get Noel's S-Craft on defense debuff Yin into 2 higher level spells to finish him off, though. Here we have the biggest forced grinding quest in the game. It's also the last egregious one, thankfully, but we're gonna stay a little bit not under-leveled for a while longer. Again, I only show the first fight. I try to get into fights with less enemies here. I reroll the fights till I get not many enemies. This is a monster chest. This isn't part of the grind quest. This is after all the other enemies were already dead. Technically, I could do it in the middle, but I just saved it for after. It's not particularly interesting. It's the same enemies that get fought in this dungeon a million times. Obviously, you know, y'all watching the video only saw the first one, but for me playing the game, it's the same enemies that got fought a million times. Just there's like 8 of them or 10 of them or whatever it is instead of 2 or 3. You can even see me getting impatient and just turboing through because I'm so sick of these forced grinding quests. I do not like them. This is a fight we could have done right at the start of Chapter 3, but we choose to hold off until 2 things happen. First, we get all the experience from that forced grinding quest, and also until a story event to get us a combination craft between Lloyd and Randy. We got our first combo craft a while ago between Lloyd and Ellie, we just haven't had a place to use it, but Burning Rage is very good. Combo crafts have super high base power in this game. Burning Rage is already one of the stronger ones because it has kind of a small AoE, and it uses Lloyd and Randy's strength, which is both, you know, their good stats, so it does shit out damage. I try not to use it too much because you can only upgrade 1 combo craft to carry over to Azure, and I originally was thinking, well, maybe I'll upgrade Burning Rage since that's the most impressive one, but Randy's really bad in Azure, and I don't know how much I'm going to use him in that run, so my logic is Tio in that game is going to be using Zero Field all the time and never have CP. So the one that I'm most likely to get use out of is probably Star Blast, which is Ellie and Lloyd's. You'll see another, you just saw another combo craft. I skipped the animation that time, but again, they just absolutely shit out damage. You can also see what I talked about earlier with Ellie having the better impede here. She's been impeding the boss instead of Lloyd. 1, so Lloyd can, you know, combo craft with Randy, and 2, because she doesn't actually have to run up to the boss and make it more likely to use its physical attack instead. Here, I think I try to find a way if I can kill it, but I don't have anything available, so I think I just end up impeding it. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Tio manages to finish it off with an S-Craft. Tio's S-Craft is hitting very hard at this point. It is a magical attack, that's why it hits so hard, even though her strength is terrible. Randy gets Warcry. It's pretty similar to Wild Rage 1. It's bad. I don't know if we ever use it in the whole playthrough. These enemies are a little bit scary. They hit decently hard, and now we're, you know, having to deal with the burn damage we've been doing to enemies this whole playthrough. But they are vulnerable to most status effects, so they're not particularly scary. They can be crash bombed, they can be delayed, they can be pretty much everything but burnt. They can be sealed. Most wind spells have a seal chance. Not most, but Sparkle and Sparkdime both have a chance to seal. Getting texted. I'm leaving this in. I'm leaving this in because this fight is easy and I have nothing else to say for commentary. We get pretty lucky with Sepith upturns here, which I guess is fitting because they're called the Sepith Demons. That's the name of the enemies, so that's pretty nice, but we don't really get any big multi-hit moves to really take advantage of it. Here we move on to a segment of the game that we only have access to Tio and Lloyd for. There's only, I think, 2 fights here. The first one is this monster chest that's very, very easy. You'll also notice this is another time I was streaming and chat is talking about Nova Online. But here we cast, I believe, Yggdrasil. This is one of the stronger spells in the game. It's really expensive, but it's not too tough to get. I think it's 10 Earth. And then a couple of other elements that aren't too hard to get. And it does a lot of damage in an AoE and one-shots all of these enemies. Here we have the boss of this little mini dungeon with Lloyd and Tio here. It is the Megalo Bat from earlier, but now it's the Megalo Queen. And it has this new move where it glares at you. This fight is much easier than the previous fight, even though we only have 2 characters now, just because we're so much stronger and the enemy is relatively weaker. It's very weak to water, and Tio, having 2 water slots, can get high-level water spells, so she does a lot of damage to it and kills it pretty quickly. It does call allies. It's basically impossible to not have it call allies without getting insanely lucky with turn bonuses, so I kind of just accept that that's a fact of something that's going to happen in the fight. You'll notice even with a crit, though, we're not anywhere close to getting one shot. And the same thing is going to be true for Fat Press. Once it uses that, it's not going to one-shot us anymore. It does a lot of damage still. It does actually more damage than its regular attack, unlike in the first fight, but it's not too scary. Here we have another monster extermination against these bubbly scissor enemies. This fight is pretty annoying. It's one of the tougher fights in the game, probably. And we don't have a super reliable way to deal with it. Our best bet is to just kind of hang on and keep our party alive long enough for them to hopefully group up so Randy can infinitely push their turn back with Power Smash. They've got a couple of status effects they can apply. We have resistance against the worst of which is Sleep. But I believe they also have, I think it's Sleep, Blind, and one other. There's 3 that they can apply, and obviously we don't have the ability to resist all of them because we only have 2 accessory slots, and we also still need stats because our characters are not super strong. Again, even though we're not that far behind in level, we are very far behind in where our lines and quartz should be. But if we do get lucky those first few turns, then it looks like every other monster extermination so far where Randy delays them. Here we have a monster chest. This one is going to be, we dark matter everything and S-craft them, I believe. I think this is one of those fights that I just like took my first or second attempt for. So I think I make a couple mistakes and it's a little bit sloppy compared to the second time this fight happens because there's 2 monster chests with the exact same layout. But any minor mistakes here are very easily avoidable. This is not a hard fight in the slightest. Yeah, that I let a Gorgon Breath go out, and then I face a chance of Petrify that I don't need to. This is a boss fight we technically don't have to win, and it will actually kick us out and force us to watch a cutscene and reload save if we want to attempt it again. But thankfully this fight is very easy. Like many enemies so far, they are not resistant to status effects. We also see Lloyd finally get Brave Smash. Brave Smash is a very good craft. It has a 75% chance to seal. It's not as good as Randy's Crash Bomb, but it is still very strong. And against enemies that don't have arts they can cast, it completely stops them from acting for a few turns. It's not going to suddenly make Lloyd good or anything, but in a vacuum, it's a pretty broken craft to the point it gets nerfed in the next game. It's just we have a lot of broken crafts at our disposal. But between Randy Crash Bombing and Lloyd Brave Smashing, these enemies are going to have a tough time landing a hit on us. A huff time. I'm keeping it in. We're like almost halfway through commentary at this point. Don't care. Not re-recording. I want the video out. I want it to be done. Although this video has been a little bit less painful to make just because the game is much shorter. Not shorter as in like the length of the game, but the fights are like, I don't know, usually less than 10 minutes instead of 20 to 30 minutes like the sky fights, so I think this video is only going to end up, oh, I'm yawning because it's late too. Oh, all the classic bad commentary things coming back in this one fight. I think the video is probably going to be just under 3 hours. Whereas the SC video was like just under 6 hours, so it's half the length. Here we have the monster chest I talked about before, the identical one. We actually can't do this before the boss we just fought because the chest is behind where the cutscene trigger is. So we have to come back after we kill it to tackle this fight. It's the same one as the last one, except this time I think I just don't let them get off the Gorgon breath. That is exactly what happens. Here we have a story fight against some wolves. This is going to be another fight where things are vulnerable to status effects. This is also going to be one of the, I think, last fights in the game that we're stuck with just the SSS. We don't get any new permanent characters, but for the most part, we will have access to at least one guest character outside of a handful of fights for the rest of the game. We Aura Cannon with Ellie there, or Aura Cannon, Aura Rain. I combined both their S-crafts. It's Aura Rain and Aerial Cannon. Either way, we Aura Rain with Ellie there. Just even though they're blinded and not likely to hit, we want to make sure we guaranteed not to die in case they do happen to hit through blind. So it's just a safety strat. It's probably not necessary if you want to gamble, but I try not to gamble whenever I can afford it. You'll notice that our characters are still draining their EP pools very quickly. Ellie and Tio are starting to get something resembling a good EP pool, but Lloyd and Randy are going to be on 90 for the rest of the game. We are so short on Sepith, we cannot afford to upgrade their lines further, or else Ellie and Tio won't be able to get all their slots unlocked, and we're going to struggle to make all the quartz that we want. Here we move on to the last sequence of Chapter 3, and we got Wazzy back in the party. Like I said before, he's a fantastic caster. He joins overleveled. We're back to not being overleveled. Finally, we're a little bit behind where the game wants us to be. After, quite a while. For this segment, we have to choose a party member. Much like the segment in the prologue. We choose Ellie this time. At this point, she's a lot more useful than Randy is, and even though Randy could crash bomb these enemies and potentially stop them from hitting the NPC, which we need to protect in all of these fights, Lloyd's Brave Smash does more than good enough of a job there, and we really want the extra offense from Ellie. Wazzy is very strong, but he's not so strong that he's like two-shotting enemies, so these fights would be a lot more of a pain with Randy because he is also very bad at dealing damage. I say also very bad. Wazzy's very good at dealing damage. It's just that these enemies are a little bit tanky. So, if the fight lasts longer, that is just more room for something to go wrong, and we would rather kill the enemies quicker by bringing along Ellie. This is going to be our last fight in this gauntlet where we have access to this kind of gimped party. After this, we'll get the rest of the group to rejoin. Something to note about Wazzy is he actually has one of the best support abilities when he's in the back. It's a Heaven's Kiss. Just occasionally his turn will show up on the turn order and he'll turn advance the party. It's not worth putting him in the back, kind of like Tio. He's just so good that we don't want to sacrifice having his damage output. He also has a fantastic line. That's not something you see here, obviously, but it's arguably even better than Ellie's. It's the same layout, except it's, I think, 1 space lock instead of 2 wind locks. 1 wind lock would be better than 1 space lock, but 1 space lock is probably better than 2 wind locks, because your second wind quartz usually doesn't help your spell list, it's more for stats. Here with Randy back, we can now dark matter all the enemies together and have him delay them. Also, for some of these fights, Kia, the NPC that we were protecting in the previous fights, will switch to a support character. She's a literal child, so we can't actually use her in combat, but she does have support abilities where she'll encourage the team and give, I think it's a strength buff. This fight is a little bit annoying. We have these 2 NPCs and we need them to not take any damage for a DP reward. The strat is to crash bomb and pray with Randy. It's pretty unlikely that they get hit because the enemies not only have to target them but then also hit them through blind, but crash bomb is not a complete and total mitigator here. We S-craft with Wazi just to steal the rush turn. Again, I want to minimize how many turns the enemy is getting, because I don't want them to target the NPCs. We also cast Genesis Flood with Tio just because it targets everything. I don't know why I did this, the Dark Matter would have grouped them up anyway. I guess I just wasn't really thinking. The damage on it isn't that amazing. It would have been much better to cast Yggdrasil or some other stronger AoE spell. There we see Kia's support ability, it's strength and speed. Here we move on to the boss of the chapter, Garcia. Probably one of the most iconic fights in the game, one of the most iconic moments in the game. But he's not too threatening of a boss. First, we start off with Wazi using his craft Phantom Rush. This is a 50% speed debuff, so it's very good. It also doesn't take him too long to get his next turn either. Even though Lloyd has access to combo crafts, which are our best source of AoE damage, we bring Randy anyway for Crash Bomb. Once these enemies are blinded, they're not that threatening anyway, and we have a group of pretty strong spellcasters outside of Randy, so we can kind of burst these enemies down anyway. Garcia being vulnerable to stat down, we can also debuff his defense. Here we see his S-Craft. This is going to kill one of our characters guaranteed. We have no way to avoid it killing one of our characters, besides tailoring our entire line to Adamantine Guard, which makes the rest of the fight tougher. But we do have proxy puppets. We actually have exactly 4 of them at this point, I believe. So we put one on everyone. We only burn one. We make sure the rest of our characters don't die, because we will need proxy puppets for fights later in the game. But we do burn a single one here on whoever he targets with the S-Craft. From there, when it's just Garcia left, after we burst everyone down, we just are wailing on him with spells. And you'll notice, I think that's our first cast of Crimson Ray that Ellie just used, that did like 3k damage. This does more damage than combo crafts, more damage than S-Crafts. This is just one of the most overtuned tools, like damage numbers wise, in the series. It does cost a lot of EP, so we can't spam it willy-nilly, but it is something that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the game. You'll notice here, Wazi with a strength up turn on a defense debuffed enemy with a crit does less than a single regular cast of Crimson Ray. Ellie and Tio won't have time to cast a spell, but we do have Ellie's new craft, Strike Bell. This is just a Heaven's Kiss. It has like an S-Craft's worth of delay, I think maybe even more. So it's not as versatile, but it's still an incredibly broken tool. And we can just finish off the boss with Randy's S-Craft. Here we have the most difficult and longest fight in the game. This is the first fight of the intermission. So I'm just going to throw this in now, because I don't know where else to put it in the video, but just for clarity's sake, for transparency's sake, I cheated in every recipe in the game. I was initially under the impression that you couldn't make every recipe under this challenge run, but you can. I just didn't rig enough, where is it? I just didn't rig enough clear gelatin drops. I think this is the only ingredient in the game that you can't buy. So now that I know that, you know, I could have at the very start of the game rigged 2 more of these and been able to do the quest, but at this point I already was not picking up recipes, so I just cheat engined in every recipe to be able to complete the quest to keep it max DP. There's not really a material impact on the run. I mean, I do get max DP, I do get the max DP reward, but it's supposed to be a max DP run, and it's not like it changes any of the actual gameplay, which is the fights. So I have an Excel spreadsheet. I might pop it on screen if I remember. That is how much money I need to spend to make every recipe if I had them. So whenever I get to the point I'm going to turn in the quest, I'm also just going to toss that amount of money. I'll buy items and then discard them until I drain however much I need to drain to keep it legitimate. So I think that's a fair compromise, because it's, again, it doesn't really matter. It's not like a skill-based thing that I forgot to grab recipes because I didn't think I could do a quest. But I'm still going to be down the exact amount of resources I would have been down anyway. So, but I figured I'd mention it because technically I am cheating. Here we're on to the first fight of Chapter 4. You might be a little confused at this being the first fight of Chapter 4, because we actually have access to quite a few fights that you would think we would want to do now while we have Noelle in the party. She actually joins us for an entire day of questing, unlike previous guest character appearances, which means we can rock around CROSSBELL and use her for monster exterminations, monster chests, whatever we want, really. And although she's not great, she is still going to generally be better than Lloyd or Randy. This time, she's joining at a little bit of a higher level instead of being underleveled, and she joins with a very upgraded line. You'll notice that she has an EP pool that's rivaling our casters right now, because all of her slots are tier 2. This means that she's going to be our best physical character by far when she's around, but she's honestly still not that impressive. In fact, I think her outing here is weaker than her outing earlier in the game in Chapter 2. While we're still happy to have her, she's not so good that we want to drag her through a bunch of fights. Something cool about this dungeon that I like, and it's also was true about the first dungeon that we had access to Noelle for as well, is these are a bunch of enemies from 3rd, and if you've seen my challenge run in that game, I have basically nothing but good things to say about that game. I'm a 3rd glazer, so any reference to 3rd I usually will enjoy. This is one of 2 monster chests in this dungeon. It's the easier of the 2, which is why we do it first. Here we have the other monster chest. This would normally be the more difficult one because these enemies, excuse me, resist a lot of status effects, but we just built a lot of CP off the previous fight, and we can kind of S-craft most of them to death. Or all of them to death. Noelle's S-craft does a shit ton right now. And here we have the boss of day 1, basically the boss of this dungeon, and this is going to be the last fight we have Noelle for the entire game. So, you know, good job, girl. You put in work. She was significantly better than I expected her to be in this playthrough. Now, mind you, she was still very mediocre, but I was thinking she was going to be completely useless, so that was a pleasant surprise. This boss has ads, and only the ads are vulnerable to status effects. The boss here is going to like to hammer us with really strong spells, which we cannot let it cast. I believe it will one-shot our characters. It casts Diamond Dust, I believe, is the spell that it's casting. So we need to make sure that we're impeding it every chance we get. Thankfully, we have 2 characters with impedes in both Lloyd and Ellie, so we should almost always have at least one of them able to act and impede. We also are using Adamantine Guard for the first time this playthrough. This is the crossbow equivalent of Earth Wall, but it works a little bit differently. First of all, it's harder to get. It costs like more. It doesn't cost more, but it takes more like elemental values on your line, and it's more expensive to cast, EP-wise. It also only gives craft guard, so it only blocks crafts. The downside to this is it doesn't block arts, but the upside to this is a different status effect than max guard. So once we get max guard later in the game, we can stack max guard and craft guard on at the same time for potentially upwards of 3 hits of damage immunity, which is very strong. Another nice thing about Noelle is she does AoE damage, so if we ever get to a point like right there where one of the ads is low on health, it's pretty easy for her to finish it off while still doing some chip damage to the other enemies. Also, like I mentioned before, her S-Craft still hits really hard. The boss can summon more ads, so we don't want to take too long killing it. We want to mitigate how many times it can do that, obviously. But like a lot of fights previously, we're really getting drained of resources very quickly. Tio's out of VP, Lloyd's almost out of EP. It's again tough to keep our resources up in this playthrough. EP pools are just so small and spells cost so much because we're forced to use higher level spells because lower level spells are so weak compared to the previous games in the series. Eventually we do take the boss down though, and from here we just have to finish off the last ad that it summoned, which is not super threatening. Here we move on to probably one of the hardest fights in the game. This fight can only be done if you have... It's pretty much close to max BP. It's a very small BP window. You even have to do some of the quests in this chapter to make sure you have enough BP to take on this fight. But this fight is a bunch of very strong enemies. We see, I think, either the first or second use of Star Blast there. We want to kill these angels as fast as possible because they just do massive amounts of AoE damage. So we get off a spell, and then we S-Craft with Tio to kill all of them but one. We do have a proxy puppet on Lloyd. It's very difficult to get all 4 characters to survive in this fight, so we do need to burn a proxy puppet. After the angels are all dead, we just have the enemies in the back that cast a lot of spells. They'll either try to confuse us, which we have immunity to, or they'll cast powerful spells over and over again. Sparkdyne, I believe, is the spell they cast over and over again. But hitting them with an Yggdrasil chunks them really hard, and one of them already took a lot of damage from Ether Buster, so it outright dies. We do want to kill these enemies fast. If we don't kill them fast, they'll do this giant self-destruct move that is like impossible to deal with without proxy puppets pretty much. And if they do it back to back, I mean, that's just wraps. We don't have a consistent way to deal with that. But again, with Yggdrasil, they die pretty quickly. Now we get to the fights we held off on because we get a new guest character that's much better than Noelle. Our new party member Dudley is a lot like Noelle in that he joins for an entire day of questing in Chapter 4, and we want to push off as much content as possible until he joins. So we save all the high-level monster chests, we save all the Chapter 4 fights from earlier, and we also take him to all of the combo craft monster exterminations. We want to use this guy as much as we can. You'll notice here he has a craft called Victory Charge that's an AoE delay. It's Power Smash but bigger. That's a really good tool that he has. He's very over-leveled. He has a pretty good line. It's above average. Time Lock is really good. It's fully upgraded. He has a craft that just has 100% death blow chance. That's really good for wiping trash mobs later in the chapter. He has a pretty strong S-craft. The AoE is small, but the damage is very high. His stats are fantastic. They're kind of average across the board on paper, but because he's such a high level, he's doing more damage, physical damage, than our physical characters, and pretty equivalent magic damage to our casters. He's just so good across the board. I didn't really talk about this fight much. We delay it with two characters that have good delays. There's not much to talk about. Here we have one of the monster exterminations that give combo crafts to characters that aren't Lloyd, basically. This fight's not immune to status effects, so it's a little bit tougher than some of the other monster exterminations we've done this far, but also we now have a much stronger party, because we have Dudley as well. We use Adamantine Guard to deal with the enemy's attacks. They also, I think, have a chance to Death Blow, but we just have everyone with resistance. These enemies are weak to wind, very heavily weak to wind, and Sparkdyne is not the most expensive or slow to cast art in the game, so it's something that we can use pretty reliably without draining our EP pool too hard. You'll also see an S-craft from Dudley here. It does a lot of damage. It also looks really fucking cool. Lloyd didn't have an Adamantine Guard there, so we ran him into the corner. It's not like he has that much valuable he can do on his turn anyway. Again, he's kind of useless at this point in the game. You'll also notice that we're getting into the late game. We're at the end of Chapter 4, and we are still using Tear, Tira, and Breath as our healing spells. The low-level healing spells are so good in this game compared to any of the later ones. Holy Breath gets a couple of uses, but for the most part, the high-level healing spells are way more expensive than they are effective. Here we have another monster extermination to get a combo craft. Unlike the last enemies, which mainly stick to physical attacks, these enemies are going to constantly be casting spells. Lloyd's actually got a use case here. He's going to delay one of them while Ellie delays the other, and we're just going to try and prevent them from casting spells as much as possible. They will not one-shot us like the previous boss when we had Noelle, but they will still do a lot of damage, and we can't let them constantly get spells off because we don't want to be taking turns off to heal. We get an unlucky health upturn here, which extends the fight a little bit. Also, we can't always impede them in time, so what we have to do is we have to have LES craft to heal the party back up. Thankfully, because Lloyd moves far out of the way, it doesn't catch everyone in the AoE twice. If he gets targeted, he's going to be the only one that gets hit. But unfortunately, Galleon Tower does blind, which, hampers the usefulness of a physical character quite a bit. The same enemy hits another health upturn, which is pretty unlucky, actually. It survives way longer than it otherwise should, seeing as the other enemy, I think, is about to die on our next spell cast. And then it hits a third health upturn. This is, pretty miserable luck at this point, but thankfully this fight's not too difficult. And Lloyd manages to impede through a blind, so that kind of makes up a little bit for the bad luck that I got earlier. We actually run out of EP on Dudley and Tio here because of how much this boss healed and how annoying it was. You see another craft there, Fist of Love. That's a very good craft. It's kind of like Reese's Holy Blessing, but without the revive. Here we have our first high-level monster chest. This is the lowest high-level monster chest, and one that you can do much earlier in the game. I don't care about the reward too much, so I just hold off until we get Dudley, just for, like, sanity's sake, so I can do them all at once, and I didn't have to route this in somewhere else. These enemies, we can just cast Adamantine Guard and A Reflex. The A Reflex is because they cast a really strong Earth spell that they'll kill themselves with, and the Adamantine Guard is so we don't die to their other attacks. Their other attack. It's just a regular attack. Oh no, I guess it's not just other attack. They also have the charge move that the other version of this enemy from earlier in the game had. Here we see Crimson Ray doing a small, minuscule, insignificant 7k damage. I don't know why I flicked over Flea there. I think that was a mistake. This attempt is pretty clearly going to win. I think I just misclicked. Here it's about to die anyway, but we still see how much damage the Reflect would have done, which is about as much as a Crimson Ray. Here we have kind of an interesting monster extermination, albeit an annoying one. These enemies have giant AoE impede, so what we want to do is we want Dudley to act before Ellie, so he can start casting a Crimson Ray before she gets a turn. So then she can Strike Bell him, so he casts the Crimson Ray and then S-Crafts, which combined with our other characters' S-Crafts will get pretty close to killing one of them. Although these enemies have an annoying mechanic of pretty much stopping you from casting spells without Strike Bell, once we kill one of them, the fight becomes pretty manageable. So we want that huge amount of burst damage early on, even though it's a bit of a resource dump. Once again, we single target Strike Bell Dudley just to get the Crimson Ray off in turn time. Even though Ellie's Crimson Rays do a little bit more damage, no one else in the game has access to Strike Bell, so Dudley's our next best option. Tio has a real hard time getting Crimson Ray and the other spells she needs because of her 2 waterlocked slots. Water Quartz just don't give the elements you need for any of the good spells in this game. So even though Dudley, I think, has a slightly worse art stat, he's our best user of it in this fight. Two S-Crafts on 7th up turns is pretty nice. Even with all of these S-Crafts on 7th up turns and whatnot, we're still so starved for 7th in this playthrough. I'm sure you can see it at the end of every fight, but just, again, it's water and fire that we just get a minuscule amount of throughout the game. We're down to one last enemy, but we're also out of EP on Dudley. He doesn't have enough for Crimson Rays anymore, so we're going to have to chip it down with weaker spells. Thankfully, weaker spells do cast faster, so we're not going to be in as bad of a spot with, you know, risking getting impeded over and over again. Unfortunately, because we're eating hits over and over again because we can't Adamantine Guard anymore because we need Tio to attack, Ellie is kind of stuck on healing duty. She's also not fully set up to have spells that are good against these enemies because Dudley is yoinking all of that quartz because of earlier in the fight. I think realistically, I probably should have spent Dudley and Tia's S-Crafts to speed things up here, but I knew I could do it without them, and so I got a little bit stubborn, I believe. Here we have another fight. This is part of a side quest that we could take on the first day, but again, we hold off till we get Dudley. It's the same enemies from earlier in the game that have the Earthshaker counterattack, except now they are vulnerable to, or sorry, now they're not vulnerable to status effects, so we can't delay loop them anymore. But once we have access to Dudley, we have another strong caster and can output a lot of AoE damage and should be able to kill them before they have a chance to Earthshaker too many times or call allies or do whatever other annoying thing they do. They do get off one Earthshaker, but we're tanky enough to eat one, and then we can S-craft whatever one is left, and then finish off the one that Earthshakered. Here we have another high-level monster chest. This is the easiest of the bunch because it is vulnerable to delay. We do need damage to actually kill the high-level monster chest, so it's not something that we can do super early, even though it's vulnerable to delay. Also, we need 2 characters that delay, so the earliest we'd be able to do it is when we got Noelle. But again, I just wait till Dudley joins because we don't need the resource that we get from it right away anyway. And he's a bit more helpful in theory. If I couldn't upgrade slots or something and I needed him to cast spells after one of them was dead because I could only afford 1 Crimson Ray, something like that, he would be helpful for. Here we have one of my favorite strats in the run. This is a strat that is using Dudley to delay specifically because his delay is bigger than Randy's. So the important thing here is that Dudley acts before Ellie because he needs to give himself delay. Tio also needs to act before Ellie. We take off all of Ellie's speed boosters and give everyone else speed boosters. We also give Dudley 2 accuracy boosters. We buy an evergreen just for this fight to make sure he doesn't miss. But we need the bigger AoE on his delay because sometimes he's going to have to delay these enemies twice before a dark matter can regroup them. You'll also notice there's a funny thing that happens, that when he deals knockback to the enemies from his delay, his tile overlaps with one of them, which is not something that normally is supposed to happen in the combat system. But once we get past the first turn, we just kind of do this loop over and over again until they die, and Ellie can start pivoting over to casting AoE fire spells to kill them. One thing to note is Randy does have a proxy puppet equipped. We got lucky in this attempt and didn't have to use it because only one of the 2 enemies that's in range of him actually hit him. But I don't use the proxy puppet after this as if he burnt it. It just kind of burns a hole in my inventory and never gets re-equipped because, you know, in theory I should burn it here, so I don't want to conserve the resource because of RNG. We do run out of EP with Tio eventually, which means we can't group with Dark Matter anymore, which means we can't delay anymore, so we use a combo craft between Tio and Randy here. We choose Tio and Randy so that way Ellie can keep CP. We're not going to use Randy much for the rest of the game. Here we have probably the trickiest of the high-level monster chests. We have Lloyd with a lot of evade boosters, not enough to dodge completely reliably, but enough to dodge some attacks. These enemies also have undodgeable attacks, and an undodgeable attack called Dissection, but they can also waste turns by delaying the whole party, which is not that scary despite it being a whole party delay. So we want Lloyd to bait them into the corner and keep them off the rest of our characters, while they just hammer them with spells. Again, this is a situation where if we can kill one of them, Lloyd can reasonably survive the other. But surviving 2 is pretty difficult. So again, we want to kill one as fast as possible, and we're going to burn S-Crafts to do so. There's Dissection, it almost one-shots, and it's undodgeable. We do also have Adamantine Guard as a tool to help out. And like I said, he also has a lot of evasion boosters for whenever they do things that aren't Dissection. Also, they overlap with each other and sometimes will just waste turns once he's in the corner. which is pretty helpful. We use a combo craft to finish off one of them. I know I'm going to S-craft the second with Tio anyway, and it's more damage to do the combo craft and then S-craft than to just do a 200 CPS craft. Combo crafts are very strong in this game. They have very, very high base power and do a lot of damage. Once we're down to one enemy, it's much easier. We can pretty reliably get Lloyd healed up, and our other characters can just cast spells. At this point, the delay is now annoying rather than helpful, because instead of wasting a turn not moving towards Lloyd to hit him, instead, they're making it so it takes a little bit longer to kill the enemy. Here, I Burning Heart to get Ellie onto a rush turn, so you can either combo craft or cast a spell. I forget which she does. She Holy Bullets and gets next turn. Either way, I didn't remember exactly what action she took, but she can take a high delay action and act again immediately. That's the best part about Burning Heart. I didn't talk about it much. A lot of people think it's broken. I think it's kind of not that good because it's attached to Lloyd, but on paper it's very broken. It gives him 50% speed, strength, defense, and it makes him act again immediately so he can use it to manipulate turn order. It's a good craft, it's just attached to a character that can't take super good advantage of it. Here we have the last high-level monster chest. This one's not too tough. The only annoying thing is that these enemies can self-destruct, so we have to plan around that and make sure we don't die to it. We move up Lloyd right away so that enemy will stop and just attack him. This will keep them grouped up for casting Shadow Blade. These enemies are vulnerable to time, and Shadow Blade, while nowhere close to as high damage as Crimson Ray, is a very good combination of not too expensive. It costs like 100 EP or something with EP cut, and also being good damage and good AoE, and hitting on an element that things are often weak to, which is time. There, we would have gotten another Adamantine Guard off if they hit us, and then we should be able to always finish them off here with a combo craft, so... We don't need the dodges, they just help with people not getting ganged up on. And now we move on to the actual dungeon that Dudley joins for. We start off with a mob fight. I handled this one sloppy, because I kind of forgot it existed, to be honest. I could easily just deathblow these enemies with Dudley, which is what I'm going to do when they show up in other fights. But for this first fight, I just cast AoE spells and risk a chance of death and have to use Ellie's S-Craft. It's not worth redoing the dungeon to, like, deathblow them instead, because it's overall an easy fight that doesn't really matter, but... Like I said, I handle it a little bit sloppy. Here we have a monster chest with a lot of the same enemies. And I believe this time, well, first I tab out to make sure I'm recording, clearly, because the video freezes. And this time I do actually use Judgment Bullet. Again, 100% death blow chance. Very, very good craft for dealing with trash. We also take advantage of Brave Smash. These are robots, so I'm pretty sure they're all immune to blind, which means Seal is going to be our best option to disable them, which means Lloyd's actually a little bit better than Randy here. You'll notice we take Lloyd into a lot of these Chapter 4 fights just because they either resist status effects, and if things resist status effects, then Lloyd's a little bit more useful because he can buff his stats and impede things. Or because we specifically want Seal over Delay or Blind. Here we move on to... I almost said a monster chest. What we just fought was a monster chest. These are story encounters. There's like 2 keys we have to get in the dungeon, and we get jumped by a big group of enemies both times. Here, Dudley uses Victory Charge to delay the majority of them. We also have Lloyd Brave Smash to seal a lot of them. We don't need to seal everything, but it's a 75% chance, so he's likely to get some. We Dark Matter them up, Dudley Victory Charges again. These enemies are pretty weak, so Victory Charge even does good damage whenever he does it. Dudley is not a bad physical character at all. It's just we were fighting a lot of high-level enemies that have such high defense that physical damage is pretty worthless outside of S-crafts and combo crafts. Here we're fighting flying felines from the Sky Arc, and they're also vulnerable to Death Blow. We start with a Judgment Bullet from Dudley again. This dungeon is split up into 2 halves. Like I said, there's 2 keys we need to find, and you can tackle them, I believe, in any order. Here we have the monster chest on this side of the map. Again, more enemies from the Sky Arc. It's the fish from the Lighthouse side quest. We do hit them out of the Bell AoE. It doesn't matter that much because they're going to move right back into it. It was kind of a dead turn because Lloyd whiffed the seal on both of them. We do have to Adamantine Guard there because, as you can see, they almost killed us, actually. They do a lot of damage, and they do hit AoE. The last one isn't going to get his turn because Dudley can Judgment Bullet it, but to get to that point, we do need an Adamantine Guard. Here we have the next key fight. These enemies are not particularly strong. There is a lot of them though, and they can kind of swarm and gang up on us, so we are still going to try and debilitate them a little bit. I don't know why I Brave Smashed that group. That group is far away and not in range to attack us. I should have Brave Smashed the right side instead, but it doesn't matter that much because turn 1, only one of them are in range. And then once we group them up with Dark Matter, the rest of the fight is easy because we can have Dudley S-craft them for a lot of damage. And here we move on to the boss of Chapter 4. We have Lloyd and Dudley in front, and we have the girls in the back. They are in range of that missile attack turn 1. We also move Dudley up without attacking. We want him to get in range to delay the adds in the back. Or more specifically, I think just one of them. Oh no, it's probably both because we Dark Matter. Yeah, we Dark Matter them together and have him delay. It's the same strat we've been using for a lot of these fights here. We also move Lloyd up to kind of jail the boss in the corner, again, so he can't target the girls. They're a little bit frail. Tio more so than Ellie. And Dudley and Lloyd have a much easier time surviving. Dudley himself is not actually super tanky, but again, we need him up front to delay enemies. This is also going to be Dudley's last fight in the party. He has carried immensely hard for the short time he's been around in Chapter 4. He's the GOAT, but we do have to say goodbye. I'd love to keep him for the whole game, but that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. Another annoying thing about these adds, which of course the boss can summon more, thank you Trails, is they can heal the boss. They don't heal that much, but it is annoying. It can extend the fight if we leave them alive for too long. We take advantage of one last crit S-Craft from Dudley, this time on 200 CP, and it does a lot of damage. We also see Lloyd's new S-Craft. It's actually AoE, and it does decent damage, although it doesn't grind quite as much Sepith as his first one. It's a lot weaker than Dudley's, but, you know, it's better than what Lloyd was doing before. Because Dudley's about to leave the party, and he gets a rush turn when there's only one ad left, I have him give his CP to Lloyd with Tough Love. Just kind of dump it all on him, because there's no use for it on Dudley anymore. I don't know why I have Dudley heal himself here. I could have given one more Tough Love to Lloyd if I wanted to. Not that it matters much, because he wasn't the one getting targeted. Maybe that self-heal was a panic, but it definitely was not the right choice. And now we move on to the final chapter, CROSSBELL'S Longest Day. One of my favorite final chapters in the series, actually. However, this opening segment is not why it's one of my favorite final chapters in the series. I actually don't like this opening dungeon very much. It's just back-to-back trash fights. Again, it's one of those, like, Trails from Zero forced grinding moments, pretty much. This first fight is nothing to write home about. It's a mob fight against a lot of the same Mafia enemies we've been fighting throughout the game. We are in a little bit awkward positioning. We start out surrounded, so we're on the back foot and have to play defense a little bit, but it boils down to apply status effects to enemies and then hammer them with AoE spells. We do single target Strike Bell Randy so he can start power smashing some of the enemies, which is pretty funny. There's no guarantee that Tio's delay would have gotten off in time, and we also wanted to cast a spell to end the fight, so. We have a new party member, Yin. This is one of the more mediocre guest characters in the game. Yin is decent. I'm not gonna say Yin. Fuck it. I'm gonna say Risha. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you know the plot. And also, the game reveals it very early on, so it's not even like it would be spoiling anything anyway. Risha is not great. She does have a craft that pulls in and hits twice. That's pretty good, but it only does 400 times 2, roughly, and her basic attacks do like 600, so it doesn't do that much more damage, but it does do more damage, and it's very CP efficient because it hits twice, so it's going to be pretty useful here. She also has a worse version of Dudley's Judgment Bullet. I think it might be cheaper and she acts faster, but it's only 90% death blow instead of 100%, which is like an annoying hit to reliability. She's also an okay caster. Her EP pool is significantly worse than Dudley's because her line is a little bit worse. Though she's not an amazing caster, but she'll do okay damage with spells. Again, she's going to be better than Lloyd and Randy for the most part, but nothing to write home about, especially for this like strong in-lore character you only get in the final chapter. Risha or Yin is a little bit of a letdown here. I'm not talking about the fights because these fights all suck. This is one of the most boring segments in the entire game. You're fighting a bunch of generic Mafia enemies that are immune to status effects, and you have to do it many times back to back, and it's just not really interesting to talk about in my opinion. We will Strike Bell to get people turns. We're also using Tia's new craft that she just got through a side quest, Absolute Zero. It's a magic craft, so she does okay damage with it, and it has a high chance of inflicting freeze. We get it much later than all the other status effect crafts, so it's not as good, but for this segment, where we're kind of using a lot of crafts to kill enemies instead of arts, because there's not heal points between these fights, and I didn't know when I was going to level up. Something that does decent damage that only costs CP and also has a chance to immobilize enemies is quite useful here. Yin is actually arguably our worst character of the bunch outside of Lloyd, who isn't being actively used. Since I don't have too much to talk about for these fights, and I'm just going to be repeating myself if I try to explain what's happening on screen, we're going to podcast mode for a bit. We're going to talk about what's coming next. I do want to do Azure after this game. I get comments all the time. This still fucking blows my mind, by the way. This still shatters my gray matter. I am always shocked when people will leave like nice comments under these, like, oh my god, I watched the whole thing. You know, I really like these videos, blah, 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 blah. Please do more runs. That is, like, insane to me. And not that I'm not appreciative. It's just, like, I'm shocked that people would do that. But I am going to do Azure after this. Not right after. I played the first 3 games, challenge runs, back to back to back. I played through the remake twice. I did this run. I did the Yick run, which I still have all the footage for. I just need to edit and post. I'm not going to do Azure right away. I have other games I need to play in the meantime. I want to finish Hades 2. I want to finish Silk Song. I need games that are not as much as I love turn-based games, I need games that are not turn-based for a little bit. But after I take a short break, I do want to do Azure in the near future. Not too long from now. Maybe in a couple weeks, probably. So that's going to be fun. Azure's a game that I've been very critical of in the past and will continue to be critical of, but gameplay-wise, it's very fun, and I think will make for a good run. It's one of the tougher games in the series for sure. So that's kind of where we're heading next. That's probably going to be the next run after this. That might be the last Trails run for a while. I do not like the gameplay in the Erebonia games very much, and I don't love the gameplay in the Calvert games either. Also, by the time I'm done with Azure, Horizon will probably be out, and I'm going to want to do a playthrough of that game also. So, I don't know. I just don't think this style of run is going to be very interesting in modern Trails games because it would be way too easy, and adding too many restrictions makes the run too, I don't know, gimmicky, I guess. So I'm not too interested in replaying any of those games in this kind of style. Maybe one day, I don't know, but it's mostly the PSP era games that I'm interested in for doing these runs for. If I can come up with a good idea for the Sky first remake, maybe I'll do that at some point too. Or if, you know, the remake for SC ends up being very difficult, maybe I'll do a run for that game or something, but no hard plans for any more Trails runs post Azure. There are a couple runs I want to, not that I have planned out, but I have floating around in my head, mostly for other bad games, kind of like Yick. Final Fantasy IV The After Years is one that I think could be really fun, because I've never seen a low-level run for that game before. Mega Man X Command Mission, that's another one that I think could be fun, that game. That game's not even bad, it's just, like, weird and not great, but it does have cool concepts at least. I don't know, I think runs for, like, bad games that people don't really do runs for, like Yick, for example, which, again, I still need to edit. I think that could be enjoyable, because, like, you know, I could do runs for games that I like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy V or Final Fantasy IV or whatever other JRPG that I like, but people already have good low-level runs of these games. There's not much I can add besides just doing already optimal strats. So, I gotta find something else, you know? But yeah, again, I mostly just make these videos for archival purposes. Like, I try to make the video a relatively watchable product for people that do enjoy watching it, but the main point here is just, like, I'm doing this run that I think is cool, and I want to post it so it's out there, more so than having the intent for people to watch. Also, I tab out to double check if they're vulnerable to death blow, which they are, so we death blow them. That's it. That's the next 2 encounters. It's the same enemies in both. But it does shock me that people actually watch these and are interested in these. Again, I think it's cool. I mean, it's like geek, goop, nerd shit, but it's cool that people share that interest and get something out of it. Here we move on to the boss of this dungeon, Ernest. He's a pretty easy fight overall. It's going to be a lot of adamantine guard. We also got Zero Field on Tio, so now we have access to actually a better version of Grail Sphere technically, because it covers the whole map. It's just not as required in the games that it's in. We also have a rush turn, a really lucky rush turn on Ellie, so we dump S-Crafts and then Strike Bell, and then get a turn to give CP back. Normally, super strong starts like this are not something that I would keep, but Ernest is not a particularly difficult boss, and it more sped things along than actually drastically changed the strategy, so I think it's pretty fair to keep in. He does come with two enemies that are relatively strong. They're kind of tanky and not vulnerable to any status effects, but all they really do is clear our earth walls. They don't hurt too bad. Yin's S-Craft, like a lot of the other guest characters we have been getting, is pretty strong. It's actually not hitting as hard as Noelle or Dudley's, but it does cover the entire screen, which is a benefit. Ernest himself is really not that scary. He's gonna just kind of walk up and swing at us with AoEs. They don't one-shot us or anything, but he does have ads that help clear earth walls for him, so we have to be a little bit careful, and he will eventually S-Craft us. I don't think I ever take damage from it, so I'm not sure how much it hurts. I'm not sure if we absolutely need an earth guard, if it'll one-shot us or not, but it's something that we want to avoid one way or the other. We are still fiending for Sepith upturns. We're still S-crafting on Sepith upturns. Like I said, we don't get our final slot upgraded until literally the final dungeon, so every ounce of Sepith counts. Once the ads are dead, though, the fight is more or less over, because now we're going to have a cycle of being able to always keep Earthguard up. And even if for some reason we couldn't, Tio has another 200 CP ready for a Zero Field. We see Yin's last craft here. Not her last craft. I'm saying Yin again instead of Rishi. I'm not being consistent. She has a 50% strength and speed buff. It's good to pop before using an S-craft, especially if she doesn't already have 200 CP. The last craft you never see is just like a line physical attack. It's bad. It's not good. Here we canceled the Team Rush. Even though we'll do some damage with the Team Rush, especially with Yin having strength up, I'd rather have Ellie just cast a spell because she hits really hard. I mean, even her Dark Matter, which is not a particularly strong spell damage-wise, is hitting for 1.5k. She has a tough time getting Crimson Ray on her line in this fight, I think. Either that or he resists it. I think it's a combination of both. I think it's not super easy to get, and he has an 80% resistance, so we ought not to go for it. Here we have a mob fight with NPCs. This fight is actually kind of annoying. These NPCs need to, again, not take damage for extra DP, I believe. So we start off the fight with a Zero Field. The silver lining here is most of these enemies are vulnerable to Crash Bomb. The dog enemies for a while now have been resistant to status effects, but the Mafiosos still get blinded. Even deep into the final chapter, Randy is still just absolutely decimating enemies with status effects. It is insane how few enemies resist status effects in this game. Kia actually has an attack, which I kind of glossed over there for a second. Zeit is like with the group physically in the story, but doesn't like show up in battle. But Kia in this fight can do AoE attacks with Zeit whenever she gets a turn, which is kind of helpful. It adds to damage a little bit. It's certainly welcome. Here it actually finishes off some enemies. Once again, like I said before, we're still S-crafting on Sepith upturns. We're still trying to squeeze out as much as we can. So, normally I don't show much shit that happens just outside of the fights, but this one is funny enough that I want to put a clip in. Tio has not gotten a single weapon upgrade the entire game. Even Ellie eventually got one, because I needed her to hit something physically at some point, I believe, but this is the the first time Tio is getting one, and it's her ultimate weapon, because it's the only one in the game that boosts anything besides strength. She gets 20 arts from it. Here we move on to the Gauntlet against the Crossbell Guardian Force. These enemies are pretty much just improved versions of the ones we fought all the way back in Chapter 2. We're going to fight Halberd guys also in other fights. They're going to have spells to cast now. They're going to have higher stats, they're going to do more damage, and we have a lot of back-to-back fights with no break in between. And we have to win them all for the last bit of DP of the playthrough to max us out here. We don't want to play super conservative in these fights. We're okay burning resources to kill these enemies faster. They're also vulnerable to status effects, and while status effects don't completely trivialize the fights because they do have scary spells they can cast, specifically the Halberd guys because they can cause Petrify, we do still want to debilitate them. It's actually kind of odd in that Lloyd sealing them is less useful than it would normally be, because then it's going to just force them to cast spells instead of doing nothing, whereas if they're blinded, they might make physical attacks that miss, or they might cast spells. But these first couple fights, there's not too many enemies, so they're nothing to write home about. They're not too scary. A lot of the times, if Ellie gets the first turn, we immediately Strike Bell with her, so Randy can throw a Crash Bomb. I believe she has all of our speed boosters, or not all of our speed boosters, because we have a ton of speed boosters at this point, but a lot of our good speed boosters. We also Zero Field with Tio. She's going to have the Gladiator Belt glued to her for most of the rest of the game, so we're okay with being pretty liberal with Zero Fielding. CP gain in the Crossbell games is generally pretty high. You have a lot of tools to restore it. And Tio herself has AoE attacks, so in mob fights she can hit multiple enemies to get a bunch of CP back fast. And she's a caster, so she can also hit multiple enemies that way. She's almost back up to 100 CP Zero Field already, so we do not want to be conservative with it at all. We only got the tool for the end of the game, so we might as well use it. With some Holy Bullets from Ellie, she gets all the way there, back to 200 CP. Which is nice because, again, these fights are going to get harder and harder as they go. Every time they've added an enemy. This fight is one of the trickier ones. There's a lot of enemies here, and I want to say we end up being a bit more aggressive here and cast more spells. We also pop another Zero Field. Again, same logic as I said earlier. We want to use it whenever we have it, pretty much, unless there's no reason at all to. Oh, we get a Team Rush. We don't cast more AoE spells. We get a lucky Team Rush to kill most of them. It's been a while since I've done these fights. I have a bad habit of recording commentary much later and not rewatching things back. I probably should fix that, but also I just loathe the process of recording commentary so much that I don't know if I care. Anyway, we got kind of a mini boss in here. We got Randy's girlfriend, Muriel. I think that's how you say it. I don't know. I pronounce so many names wrong. Muriel is not much different from the other enemies here. She acts the same way the other Crossbell Guardian Force enemies do. She's not particularly scary. And we can handle this more or less the same way we handle the other fights. She's still immune to status effects and whatnot. We do kind of accidentally stick Lloyd in the wage cage here. We end up getting him surrounded. We also have him Burning Heart before popping a combination craft to kill everything. Here we have the hardest fight of the bunch, but we also have a lot of resources stocked up here, so it's not too scary. We can have Randy immediately S-craft and then build enough CP back for when he gets Strike Belled to throw a Crash Bomb. We also Brave Smash with Lloyd. I know I said earlier it's less useful here, but it's not completely useless because we want them to cast spells, because we're trying to burst these guys down anyway. So if they don't attack immediately and they stay grouped up, that's good for us, because Randy is going to get a second S-craft off and kill most of them there. If we let this fight play out and didn't burst them down, it is actually quite tricky. Here we are in the final dungeon with a couple familiar faces. We get Estelle and Joshua, our final two guest characters, and they're going to stick with us for the rest of the game. They are both very good. On paper, they're not amazing. They're kind of both the same all-arounder, not amazing stat, not amazing line characters they are in the Sky games, but here they come fully upgraded with fully upgraded lines and are going to run laps around Lloyd and Randy. I've seen people rag on Estelle but praise Joshua in this game in a couple different places, actually. In both like forums online, tier list videos, that kind of shit. But there's actually not a big gap between them. You notice I didn't talk about this boss at all because it's easy and doesn't matter. They're very similar. The difference mainly is just that Joshua has Flicker, which is a pretty useful craft for a couple fights at the end of the game. And Estelle has a slightly higher damage S-craft, which is good, but not as good as Flicker. But for the most part, they're just both really strong filler characters for the last dungeon. This last dungeon is going to be a lot of easy monster chests. We do kind of want to care about our CP on all of our characters. We want to go into the final boss with max CP. So we don't want to be too willy-nilly with Joshua and Estelle throwing away their CP, and they're going to have Gladiator gear, and I think even the Gladiator belt at times, just to build it up during these easy monster chests, which die to AoE spells. Something also to note is Estelle and Joshua have a combination craft, Timeless Pummel. It is an incredibly good combination craft because they're both at a high level with pretty good stats, and the craft has very good base power and very good AoE. That fight, I didn't talk about it, you can flee from it, it's a glitch, but because I can flee from it, it makes it not an illegal encounter for this rule set, so I do actually have to flee from it. I had to replay the entire final dungeon, because I didn't know that existed until someone told me. And so, I had to go back. It did change things a little bit. It made my characters a little bit weaker for the final boss, but it also made it so they guaranteed leveled up between phases, which we'll see later. Again, there's not much to talk about for these monster chests. I know it's kind of anticlimactic. We're at the final dungeon, and so far all of the bosses and monster chests have been incredibly easy, but we do have fights to talk about coming up shortly here, so there's still some fun fights left. In fact, the final boss was one of the tougher fights in the whole game. These monster exterminations are a little bit annoying, and monster chests, excuse me. And this one I do a little bit sloppy. I think I don't have status immunity on people that need it. And these enemies are a little bit tankier and don't immediately fold to spells in the same way that the rest of the chests thus far have. And this is unfortunately the group of enemies we have to fight the most, which is a little bit annoying, but not the end of the world. Here we have Demon Ernest. He's a lot scarier than his first encounter, although he himself is not that much scarier. It's more the help that he hires that's a lot scarier here. We do have to zero field turn 1 because his regular attacks now cause Death Blow, which we don't have resistance for. The enemies that accompany him are the same monster extermination from back when we had Dudley that constantly try to impede our casts, although now we can't get away with just like single target strike belling a Crimson Ray. That's just not enough damage for these stronger enemies, so instead we have to use Adamantine Guard and Zero Field to just block that Gale of Evil attack there. If one of our characters gets hit, like right here, it's really not a big deal, and generally our characters are pretty evasive, so they're going to dodge it a lot too. But now we're going to be casting spells like Last Disaster. This is the other big strong spell like Crimson Ray, except it's AoE, but it's also much harder to get and very, very expensive, so I think this is only one of 2 fights that we use it in the whole game. Once they're dead, it's just a matter of keeping our Earth Guards up and hammering strong spells onto Ernest. He does have an S-Craft, like before. I think it's the exact same S-Craft. But as long as we always have Craft Guard or Max Guard up, it's not a big deal, and he goes down pretty fast. Last monster chest of the game, and this one's unique. It's not like the other ones in this chapter that's repetitive. We open up with an S-Craft on Joshua to wipe the ads. The way this enemy works, the remaining one that didn't die, is it's going to keep trying to impede our spell casts. So the way we're going to fix that issue is we're just going to cast multiple spells. He can only ever impede 1 at a time, and it doesn't do that much damage, so it's not really a big deal. We're also, again, we have a lot of evasion just naturally from gear, so sometimes it just misses. Here we have a rematch against Garcia. This fight's a little interesting because we need to get Joshua up to a healthy amount of CP, so we actually bring along Randy for one last fight instead of Tio so he can perma-delay Garcia. We have him with all of our accuracy boosters. We have him with a good hit quartz, we have him with an evergreen, maybe even 2 evergreens. I think we have 2 at this point because we had to buy one for Dudley and we got one in the final dungeon, so he's very, very unlikely to miss. We could have Joshua flicker, and that would be better than having Randy do it in a way because we could bring along Tio to kill him faster, but again, we want to keep Estelle and Joshua's CP up for the final boss, so we have Randy have one last kind of moment to shine in the party as the one that delay locks Garcia. And here we have it, the final boss. It's going to be 2 phases, well 3, but the last one is, you'll see. We start off with a Zero Field, we let the animation rock because I don't think I have yet, and then we Timeless Pummel. What we want to do here is we want to make sure either Estelle or Joshua act before Ellie, and that Tio also acts before Ellie. They all have more speed than she does, so they are likely to do so. After the Timeless Pummel, we want to cast 2 Shadow Blades. This will kill both of the ads. Estelle is also going to start putting up an Adamantine Guard, because again, they're stackable with Axe Guard in the skin. Once the ads are gone, this fight is very easy. All we really care about is making sure we have enough CP going into the next fight. Tio needs a minimum of 100 so she can Zero Field turn 1. I think this fight ends up being a little bit slow, actually. We get a little unlucky, I believe, because he gets a health up turn here. Yeah, so this is going to make it so we kill him 1 turn slower, which draws out the fight for a little bit, for a reason that you'll see. But here we're just going to pound him with spells and make sure that Tio gets to 100 CP, which should be more or less guaranteed because she does have the Gladiator belt equipped. I could have Strike Belled with Ellie here to kill him at the same pace, but again, I was being very stingy with CP. But here, he stealths himself, and it cancels all their spell casts, and we have to wait for him to come out of stealth. But after that, we can just finish him off. This phase is very easy. It is not the real threat. Here we have the final boss, the actual true final boss. While not that difficult of a fight in a casual playthrough, it was actually not the easiest to figure out in this playthrough. First of all, we need Joshua to delay the add on the side. We also can get a double max guard, like a full CP zero field with Tio, because the last fight took long. So that's one benefit of the poor luck last fight, is it actually helps a little bit in this fight. Flicker delays the enemy on the right a lot. It already is not particularly fast in the first place, so Joshua can alternate between flickering it and getting off a Crimson Ray. This fight is a race against time. We have a limited EP pool, and the enemy here is going to start regenning health eventually, so we need to just do as much damage as possible. All we care about is killing the enemy. I know that's what we care about in every fight, but we don't really care about sustaining ourselves that much. We also get a lucky team rush turn. Even though it doesn't do as much of a Crimson Ray, it does save our EP, which is, again, the absolute biggest limiter here, is going to be Ellie and Joshua's EP pools. We also want a Calamity Claw whenever we can to lower its speed. As much as we'd love to use Chrono Down to save EP, we cannot afford to take 2 turns to cast Chrono Down when it only takes 1 to cast Calamity Claw. Ellie has to do it turn 1, which sucks, but Tio can do it from then on out because her EP pool is a little bit less valuable. We still need her help with damage, but Shadow Blade just does a lot less than Crimson Ray. Here we see the first of the boss's S-crafts. It has 2. I don't know if we see the other one or if we kill it before, but you actually can't skip these. I accidentally skipped the first phase's S-craft. I didn't mean to. I was just doing the fight so many times that I forgot. I kind of want to show off most of the animations at least once, but we're all Earth guarded up, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. We can use Chrono Down to refresh the speed down now that we're later into the fight and we're a little bit more flexible with our turn order. We also stack Estelle's morale with Lloyd's support ability to get a 50% strength boosted Timeless Pummel right here, which does a shit ton. It's basically an AoE Crimson Ray. Very, very, very good thing to get. That's something that we're aiming for in this fight to help with damage. Thankfully, morale is pretty quick to recover, so it's not super unlikely that we're able to benefit from both strength buffs at once like that. Now the boss is in its second phase. Well, I guess second phase, third phase, I don't know what you would call it. Either way, it will now pop that regen, and it's going to restore a ton of health. It restores almost 2k a turn, and it basically guaranteed gets 3 ticks of regen. Here's its second S-craft. We do end up seeing it. Once Ellie is drained of CP from casting Crimson Ray, she's going to start pivoting to getting other characters' resources, like turns and Holy Bullet or whatever. Because we are very much at a race against the clock. We can't really afford for it to get every single regen turn. We get a lucky crit with Tio here. I don't know if it ends up mattering, but I think we end up overkilling the boss, so it probably doesn't end up mattering. We even sneak in a dual strike and get a lucky crit with strike. It's not actually that lucky. He has all the crit boosters, so it's like 30%, but it's still more likely that he doesn't crit than he does crit. And then we S-craft with both Estelle and Joshua to finish the boss. We still had an aerial cannon with Ellie, and I guess an absolute zero with Tio if we really needed it. So we did overkill the boss. It's pretty unlikely that we needed the crits, but it still cuts it close. And here we have the final phase. Much like FC, it's a basically scripted encounter where we play out all our flashy animations. I choose to give the kill to the character who has more than earned it throughout this run.